Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Z, and welcome to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be discussing the two new heroes that have released. That would be Julian and Sakura, or Sakura. Terrible at pronouncing names. I apologize in advance. Before we get into this video, I want to preface this by saying that this is not one of those videos where I'm going to go through and read every single one of the skills, read the skill descriptions, whatever have you. I feel like that's something that you're capable of doing in your own time. None of that needed here. What we are simply going to do is just go into the deep dive of the heroes themselves, see where they will thrive, see where they may suffer, and then talk about things like hero pairings and things as such. So, without further ado, we'll just go ahead and dive straight into that directly, starting off with Julian. So, based on Julian's wording of his skills themselves, it seems like he's going to perform very well, right? He's obviously going to be a field hero. His job is very straightforward and such, and you can tell by going through them or through the skills themselves. The wording on his rage skill is kind of the one questionable piece, right? And I've seen this question kind of circulate around the official Discord. I've seen it circulate around my own personal Discord itself, the Knowledge Syndicate one that I have. But essentially, the question at hand is what is going to essentially be the total amount of debuffs that you get on the attack, defense, and HP. So initially, it says that it's going to be 20%. It reduces it by up to 20% every second for 4 seconds. Repeated casts increases the effect by 10% up to 50%. So the question is the total amount of debuffs that you're going to apply, is it going to be a 50% attack, defense, and HP cut, or is it going to be up to 50% of this 20% value, which means that it maxes out at 30%? Either way, it's still a very good skill, whether it's 30% or 50%. It's one of the higher debuffs that we have seen thus far, and so honestly, even if it is on the lesser end where it's 50% as a multiplier to this, totaling out at 30%, you're still going to get a great debuff out of him, and I wouldn't look at that as being any sort of a fault. If it goes up to 50%, that's kind of insane, because that's a very high amount, even more than the 47% HP cut that we see on Marco, and so it would create almost like a new bar of expectation for debuffs and such. So I can't imagine that it's that amount. I'm leaning more towards the 30%, but it is one of those open-ended questions that we won't really be able to answer until we have combat reports to validate that. All in all, Julian just feels like a steroid version of Marco in terms of the flat stats that he provides for infantry. He provides things like the 30% HP. He has the travel speed like Marco. He also has very high defense at 40%, and other things like that, along with like a shield similar to like what Marco has. But the way that his actual rage skill operates, cutting the HP, also makes him kind of feel like a hybrid of Claude in a sense, where with Claude, it's per rage skill proc basically that's happening that Claude does. He's then cutting HP. In this case, for Julian, it's the same way. It's a rage skill that's cutting the HP. You're not requiring or dependent on a counterattack like Marco is. So, in a sense, he feels like kind of a hybrid mix of both. Now, would you use Julian as a support or a lead? I think that there's kind of arguments for both. In a sense where he has the support talent tree, which is, obviously not the best thing in the world. And for a lot of people, maybe a letdown, because you do lose out on that rage regen if you have mislead. But I don't think that that is a total loss. So in whole, or as a summary, you will lose a couple of seconds of skill of your rage skill rotation if you have mislead, because again, you lose the skills talent tree and you get the support one instead. So you may have a couple seconds of extra time between your rage skill procs themselves. But the trade-off is actually kind of interesting. So where you do lose some rage regen, you get things like reducing the travel speed in a circular area of 24%, and it affects up to 5 targets. Now, 24% pairs actually quite well with the fact that he also has here when taking skill damage, which could also include AoE skill damage if you're fighting near, Louis marches, Ethan marches, Sophie marches, even from riders, they have AoE now, infantry and such. Everybody has AoE in their marches, right? And that's like a big thing. Miyamoto, Eileen, and such. And this also cuts the movement speed by an additional 30%. So a total combined movement speed cut of 54%. That just kind of makes it to where your other marches almost feel stickier, right? It is kind of the best way to put it. So like your slower marches or marches that may not have move speed are able to then keep up. I know that with a lot of people in their marches, once you start swarming a march and they get targeted, or once they go yellow in health and stuff, you'll start to see them back away from fights. I think that these things between the support talent tree plus this skill here, plus if you even have like Claude in your March rotation or in your March setup with your other marches, you also reduce their travel speed by up to 40%. Like that's a very significant amount of move speed that's being cut from the marches nearby, and again makes it to where even if you don't have travel speed on your hones themselves or with your heroes, it still makes it to where you're able to stick to your targets and make sure that you're able to kill them and such. So it is a question to say, like, do you want to have him as support so you can take advantage of having a hero as lead to have the skills talent tree? And again, there's benefits to that because then you're able to proc this at a more consistent and faster rotation and rate. Or, you know, the trade-off is that you have him as lead, so you can take advantage of the HP cut by having him in lead. So then the support hero that he has behind them can deal bonus damage essentially to the marches that you're fighting, because he will essentially proc an HP cut to a march as lead, and then immediately after, your support will then trigger their rage skill, which will then hit a march that is already debuffed. So it'll hit somebody that has debuffed defense and HP, thus dealing more damage. So there's definitely an argument for both, I would say. Now, which kind of leads me to the next point here for potential pairings. If he is lead, I would say that you could pair him well with a Miyamoto or Eileen for the AoE to take advantage of the HP cut he applies, which also includes Sakura, because she's going to be put into the rotation as an AoE hero herself also. So Sakura, Eileen, or Miyamoto, that AoE would then be able to take advantage of the HP cut that he provides from his rage skill. There is also room to say that Isabella would also be a really good support for him too, in a sense that she has very high single damage output. She has the 25% skill damage increase as part of her kit, and so her high single target damage would be there to be able to take advantage of that debuffed enemy. On top of that, with Isabel, one of the nice things is that she does offer this 50 rage regen portion of her fourth skill, which would, at least in my head, would help be able to kind of, I guess, like mitigate or offset some of the losses that you get by not having the skills talent tree. It's not a complete replacement by any means, but, you know, at least there is some additional rage regen there to help make up for the fact. Other than that, I would say that there is also room to say that Claude is a good support for him also. Let me bring him up here. Again, we already kind of talked about the move speed or the travel speed decrease that Claude also provides. So this would be a very high move speed debuff. So your enemies would basically hardly be able to move when these two are paired together or in the same, you know, rotation or 5 march setup. But at least paired together, they would both have a very consistent HP cut as well. So Claude would proc an HP cut on rage skill use. Julian would proc an HP cut on his rage skill use as well. So this is a very heavy debuff march between that and the move speed cuts. Claude also does provide things like very heavy ability to sustain damage and stay alive, so the reduction in skill damage taken when less than 50%, the reduction in flat damage taken, things like that. Another HP or 20% HP gain there in move speed and such. So really the two together, just it's a very healthy debuff march that between the move speed, the HP, the defense cuts, things like that, really sets up your other marches to actually do extremely well also. Now, if you want to look at using him as a support to actually take advantage of the skills talent tree, I think that one of the offset pieces at that point is that you don't have him in front of your other heroes to where your support hero can take advantage of that HP cut. So really it's very limited in who would shine actually as a lead for Julian. I would say that one of the ones that could potentially take advantage of that would be your Marcos. If I could figure out where my Marco's at, I'm pretty sure I just scrolled past him like, oh, it's because I have my armaments on him. So you could use Marco here and take advantage of having the skills talent tree for the high rage regen and the rage skill proc time. And also it's the very high HP cut. So you get 47% HP cut here from the second skill of Marco when targeted. Now, bear in mind that is the requirement. It's when he is targeted that you'll get that 47% HP cut. But even if it was down at 30% for Julian, that's still a 77% HP cut that's coming from just this single march. And it's very appealing to target that march at that point because it's, you know, it has a high potential for debuffs. So whether or not it's targeted is, you know, it's hard to say. But when it is targeted, you will have a high HP cut at that point. So there is that advantage piece there. Anyone else you can really take advantage of the high rage regen. Anybody that has a skills talent tree, you know, your Miyamotos, your Eileens, your Boyds, things like that. But again, you do lose out on taking advantage of his HP cut directly in this pair by having him as support. So essentially, your other hero will use their rage skill. They'll deal damage. He will then use his second, which will then cut the HP, and there isn't really any, you know, any hard skills there to actually take advantage of that HP or defense cut and such. So that is one thing to kind of bear in mind. Do you want the higher rage regen and less potential damage output, or do you want more, you know, consistent HP cuts and debuffs and stuff like that, and having your more consistent to where your secondary hero in this pair is able to take advantage of that in comparison. If you do have him as a support, however, and you're not able to capitalize on the HP directly, I will say that you will be kind of at the mercy of the game and your rage regen or your rage skill procs of the other marches, because essentially what you'll be looking for is for Julian to debuff the enemies and then hope that some of your other marches, or at least some, but hopefully most of them, are then using their rage skills after the fact. So then they're actually using their rage skills on debuffed marches. So there's going to be an RNG factor there. You could potentially time that differently by having, like on a mass deploy, having Julian march out first and hit your enemy first, so he starts building rage first, essentially, to set that off. But again, that's it's very technical or mechanic at that point. But yeah, moving on to Sakura or Sakura. I'm not going to be able to pronounce that, and I apologize. All in all, she is set up for siege, and she's going to be absolutely disgusting in infantry rallies, it feels. You know, she's got a potential for 30% squad damage total from her weapon when it's max, up to 50% chance, or up to a 50% increased chance for the Deadwood Slash, which according to the wording here, when not garrisoned, has a 50% chance to trigger. So it seems like it's up to 100% chance for that 40% bonus damage. Not sure if it's additive, multiplicative, however that works, but it seems like it'll be 100% chance for that bonus damage, which will be huge. She does have an up to 30% basic attack damage reduction as well, as the squad size dwindles down from long rallies, plus the 8% squad damage reduction also here from having the third skill transcended. You pair this with something like Stella for rallies, where she has up to 40% basic attack reduction from her War Wheel stacks. Each stack reduces basic attack damage by 4%, stacks up to 10 times. That's that's fairly crazy, honestly, like at max stats. Now, obviously, that does reset for Stella and stuff, so you're not always going to have 40% from her, but it's still a very large sum of damage reduction you can kind of expect from the two, especially as a tank rally with infantry. Her second skill also provides an increase of damage dealt to rider squads by 10%, so it's not really something to kind of shy away from. I guess all in all, between the basic attack damage reduction plus this 10% bonus damage to rider squads, the TLDR here is that if you're running Sakura and Stella, it's probably not going to be a fun time for most rider garrisons. Now, rider garrisons are performing extremely well from what I've seen with Stella and Rick. Rick is definitely complementing, Chasey, not Stella, but Chasey and Rick garrisons are performing really well. At least from what we've seen in IR and AR. So, you know, how impactful this will be is time will tell and reports will tell, but the toolkits and the pieces are there to actually, you know, at least speak to the situation and say that this should perform fairly well. So the if target is flanked, further increases rage recovery speed by 10% on the 4 skill, means that she will thrive in multi-rally scenarios, or for those whales when swarming the tower that we see. So, you know, an AR and stuff like that, where you have triple rallies set up, or an island raid, or Genesis War and such, where, you know, whales will set a rally and then swarm the tower and such. She should be able to take advantage of that. So this is definitely a nice addition for her damage output. Her Transcended skill increases the damage to 15,000 from 9,000, so it's a 66% damage increase. So it's a very, at least in my eyes, a fairly substantial, large power spike for those who can fully transcend her. So there's definitely appeal there to get her fully transcended. I know that with some heroes, you kind of look at them fully transcended versus not fully transcended, and there's arguments to say, like, is it actually worth it? In this case here, you know, because you'll be able to use this in field and in rallies, it's a very large damage spike that you're able to get. So I would say that it is one of those heroes it's very worth. Now, moving on to the actual pairings themselves, in terms of the rally pair, I think that the standout pick, or the standout option here, the clear choice, is going to be Stella. Stella gets up to 90% counter damage, which is a very high amount. and that is multiplied against the 30% squad damage that she gets, squad damage increase that she'll have. So they're two separate multipliers to damage, so that 90% will multiply against the 30% as a very substantial bonus or compound effect. So it should increase that counter damage very much so, along with the fact that the 30% squad damage will also impact skill damage. And Stella actually has 2 skill damage skills between her rage skill and her force skill. So the fact that she has both of those, and Sakura has the rage skill that has 16,000 up to 40% more plus the 30% here, it leads for a very high damage output rally pair, essentially, when looking at the two. And so to me at least, that's the clear kind of victor there, if you're able to pair the two. Now, looking at the field pairs, there's a few ways you can kind of go with this. So if you were to use, say, Boyd as lead, or even an Isabella as a support, what we're looking at here is kind of a niche where either one of them would give Sakura a huge skill damage bonus. So Isabella again gives 25%. Boyd, when transcended, gives 35%. Those things again paired with the 30% squad damage provided here, plus the 40% bonus here, you can see where I'm going with this, leads to very high damage output. Boyd is likely the better option here because of his high attack in field also, and his shields allow the march to stay healthy, but it will be a slower march in comparison to pairing her with Isabella, where Isabella has some movement speed and such. But Boyd does get the increase in squad damage here, plus the attack, plus he also gets the 25% attack here as well. So all in all, it's just a very high fairly slow but high damage output march between the two of those. Whoops, didn't mean to close that. So moving on, your next pairing is obviously you could run a Miyamoto or Eileen with her, since she is AoE. She is going to be a great substitute if you're already running a Miyamoto and Eileen AoE pair. So if you want to substitute her in to then just kind of amplify that AoE pair, because she does bring very modernized stats to that pair itself, you're definitely able to do that between her, 45% attack, 40% HP, 50% defense and such. She's just going to be a great substitute for either one of those if you want to do that. If you do want to maintain those, like, just as much AoE as possible and maintain a Miyamoto Eileen, just put Miyamoto, Sakura, Eileen in another march, and then you'll be able to have 3 AoE pairs. But again, if you were just one of those players that maybe has like 1, 2, or maybe 3 infantry marches, and you really just want to capitalize on the single AoE march, you can definitely throw her in there with Miyamoto or Eileen and just make that AoE march kind of amplified in terms of its damage output and its performance. There is room to say that Claude, if you're unable to pair with any of the previously mentioned heroes, would pair well with her. Let me just pull him up here. So essentially, like, what we're looking at here is that he does offer the high damage reduction and the ability to keep the march healthy. He also does provide a 25% flat damage buff, flat squad damage buff to her and her high damage output. So there is that damage bonus or amplification there. Now, granted that she does have a lot of high offensive stats, like 30% squad damage and stuff. The fact that Claude doesn't have any damage output doesn't make this the most appealing march. But what is appealing here is that Claude debuffs all of the other marches debuffs other marches, but also buffs your marches in the field. So there's a lot of room, or a lot of reason, to target him in the field. And so by having Sakura there, it does make it to where this is a threat in the field, basically. Like, if you target him, it is going to hurt. He does have a threat pair at that point by having her with him. So it's not the most appealing pair, but did want to call it out because there is room to say that is a potential. Now, the question that I feel like I've gotten the most about this hero so far in game and in my my Knowledge Syndicate Discord, ever since the update came out and we were able to see this hero, is the question of Sakura on Garrison. Now I'll kind of break that down, because the main question here is it's Sakura versus Ethan, because right now we're using Ethan for the most part as infantry players for multi-rally garrisons, because he provides, 2 AoE skills, and we can also get the infantry squad, or I'm sorry, the squad defense for 45% on our infantry marches. So it's easy to say when you take a look at her kit and say, oh, well, she's not going to work on Garrison because she doesn't get the heavy strike in Garrison. There's no way to proc the heavy strike in Garrison, because it says specifically when not garrisoned, that's when you're able to potentially proc this. However, I think that that's kind of looking very narrow-minded and kind of looking at the smaller picture, because she does have a very appealing pool of perks, her toolkit and stats that benefit a garrison player or as a garrison main what we're looking for. So I'll give you a quick summary of that, right? So the summary of her stats in garrison, or what applies, is she gets a 30% squad damage from her weapon. She gets a semicircle 3-target AoE rage skill. She gets 45% attack here, 40% HP here, and 30% basic attack reduction, and 8% damage reduction as well, along with the potential, I'm going to put this here, a potential for the rage regen, right? Because there is a period here where it says when not garrison, period, if the target is flanked further, increase rage recovery speed. And with the way that we've seen behavior of skills operate for some of the other heroes, whenever there's a period, that's a break. So this when not garrison restriction here stops right here for other heroes that we've seen. So there is a chance that she does get this in garrison if the rally that's hitting you is counter rallied, or if it gets swarmed, that kind of a thing, but time will tell. Now in comparison to Ethan may have more damage output because he has multiple damage sources for damage output. So he has his rage skill, he has his awaken skill, and he has the damage output from his actual weapon itself. However, the high stats from Sakura puts the reports that you would get from both of them in pure contest. Essentially, the 30% squad damage that you get from the weapon would benefit Boyd and his rage skill, which is something that we don't currently see with Ethan, right? And the reason why that we don't see that is because Ethan has increased damage of AoE skills. So while that benefits Ethan directly, it doesn't actually benefit Boyd. So this 30% flat damage bonus would essentially help Boyd's single target damage plus her AoE, along with the 45% attack, which again would do the same thing, benefit the single target and the multi-target damage there as well. On top of that, Boyd has the 35% skill damage bonus from his second skill, which would again increase her her multi-target damage, or her AoE as well. So between the 35% skill damage, Sakura's 30% skill damage, plus 100% attack between Boyd and Sakura, you have a very promising skill damage output pair here between the two of them on both the AoE and the single target front. I think that one other call out is that the basic attack damage reduction that you get for the up to 30% here, plus the flat damage reduction, what that also kind of essentially means is that you would actually cause the 4 shields that Boyd has to live longer. And one other specific call out that, unless you're kind of like reading between the lines, you'll probably miss. But Boyd's rage skill, the shield that he gets, also when the squad size is below 50%, gain a shield for 3 seconds based on 20% of the damage dealt from this rage skill. So the fact that he's getting 35% skill damage to increase this damage plus 30% squad damage from Sakura means that this damage is amplified quite a bit, which higher damage output means higher shield obtained. Now you get a higher shield obtained because of that high damage, and then it's multiplied by up to 30% shield bonus health from his weapon as well at max stats. So you can kind of see where I'm going at here, to where it all kind of complements each other and works together to form a larger shield at that point, because you have a higher damage output on his rage skill. So I'm not here to really say that this is going to be the Ethan replacement on a multi-rally infantry garrison, but what I am saying is that it's a very solid contest, right? She definitely puts up reasons to test her in garrison, right? You can't just say, oh, she's a siege hero, she's not going to work, as we clearly saw previously with like our Riven Stellas, or even Boyd Stellas currently and such. Stella is also an infantry siege and skills hero, and she is still thriving in garrison. So there is that room to say that there is a definitely potential there, and I do see it. Definitely let me know your thoughts in the comments down below on what you think her performance will be in garrison, how you think she's going to perform in the field or in rally. Same thing with Julian. How is he going to do in the field? Did I miss anything there? All in all, I think that kind of wraps it up in terms of the heroes themselves. If you have any questions, concerns, anything again that I may have missed, or anything that maybe you've observed between the skill descriptions and such, because again, we didn't really go through those single one by one. We more just talked about a summary of them. Please feel free again to let me know in the comments below. I'd love to conversate about that. For those that are watching, please reference the comments down below, as there may be conversations going on there. If you do want to have the opportunity to join my my Discord, essentially my community Discord for Doomsday, known as the Knowledge Syndicate, we talk all things Doomsday there. We talk about guides, you know, questions like this when new heroes come out, you know, just creative thinking, outside the box thinking for heroes, things like that. You're more than welcome to join. I'll put an invite link in the actual description of this video below. Yeah, other than that, guys, I appreciate you guys being here. Really looking forward to this infantry release. Honestly, from my end, they both look like great heroes, and definitely excited for them. Can't wait to see their performance, and I will check you guys soon and in the next one. Peace.
Every time the full moon comes around, a change in the night as the secrets come alive.